Dave Lewis was born to Joseph and Emily Lewis in Grand Prairie, Alberta on September 3, 1936. His love of horses began at a very young age, and as a youngster, Dave started jockeying his father's racehorses. Through the encouragement of world champion Chuckwagon driver Ralph Vegan, 1965 saw Dave partner up with Mac Sutherland to purchase some horses, and together the two men assembled their first Chuckwagon outfit. Dave's career in Chuckwagon racing was born. With his sponsor Lyle Adam, Dave Lewis joined the Canadian Rodeo Cowboys Association in 1967 and drove his first show as a professional that spring at the Handhill Stampede. He also drove at his first Calgary Stampede that same year, hitting the money twice and placing 5th in the Calgary Stampede Consolation Chuckwagon races. 1968 was a breakthrough year for Dave Lewis. In just his second year as a professional, he won his first career day money at the Hardesty Rodeo, and by the time the Calgary Stampede rolled around, he had posted additional day money runs at the Stettler Stampede and the Wainwright Frontier Days. At the 1968 Calgary Stampede, even with 8 seconds in penalties, Dave still managed to finish the show in 4th place overall, just 3.5 seconds behind the eventual champion Gary Dorchester. Dave finished out the 1968 season in 5th place overall in the world standings. On February 17, 1969, Dave married Joan Dorchester and became father to her 3 children, Dallas, Rick, and Corrine Fraser, and soon after the Lewises welcomed son Greg into the family. The 1969 season also saw Dave outrun the biggest names in the sport in Tom Dorchester, Ralph Vegan, and Hallie Walgenbach to capture his first career show championship at the Wainwright Frontier Days. He established a new track record on the final night of the Calgary Stampede and was runner-up to the World Championship to his new father-in-law, Tom Dorchester. The next few seasons saw Dave Lewis become a regular winner on the professional circuit at smaller shows in places like Grimby, Coronation, and Wetaskiwin, and he had placed inside the top 5 in the world standings in 1971 and again in 1972. But the start of the 1973 season was dismal, to say the least, as Lewis failed to place in any of the shows over the first half of the season until the Ponoka Stampede, when he finished 2nd overall to Ralph Vegan. However, this proved to be a lightning rod for Lewis as he roared into the Calgary Stampede in the right frame of mind. Top 5 runs in 7 of the first 9 nights, including a day money run on night 6, had propelled Dave Lewis into a seemingly insurmountable lead at the Rangeland Derby with just 1 run to go. On the final run, Lewis had the luxury of nursing his outfit around the barrels and assuring himself a penalty-free race, but he chose not to do so, and that decision, gallant though it may be, cost him. In one of the most stunning finishes the Calgary Stampede has ever seen, Dave's lead vanished when his wagon swung wide at the bottom barrel, causing interference. To add another insult, one of his outriders failed to finish the race. Altogether, 7 seconds in penalties were more than enough to hand the championship to the Merle Anderson outfit driven by Slim Helmy, while Dave Lewis was forced to settle for 2nd place overall. With half a season still to go, many wondered if Dave Lewis could recover from his slow start, and would the devastating loss at the Calgary Stampede be a knockout punch that would take away any motivation he might have in completing the season on a high note. But as former world heavyweight boxing champion Jack Dempsey once said, "A champion is someone who gets up when he can't." Not only did Dave Lewis get up, by season's end, Dave Lewis, driving the Lyle Adam outfit, was crowned the 1973 World Champion Chuckwagon driver, the lone world championship of his career. In 1975, Dave started driving for Doug Streeper along with Lyle Adam. The remainder of the 1970s saw Dave Lewis capture an incredible 15 show championships in 6 years between 1974 and 1979, 4 with the Lyle Adam outfit and 11 with the Streeper Transport outfit. Among his wins were major stops in Alberta at the Ponoka Stampede, Grand Prairie, and Lethbridge, and in British Columbia at Prince George, Dawson Creek, and Cloverdale. He broke or equaled 8 track records and was the reserve world champion in 1977. But despite all of his success throughout the 1970s, winning the Calgary Stampede Rangeland Derby was one thing missing from his resume. When philosophical differences arose between the Calgary Stampede and the Canadian Rodeo Cowboys Association, it was unclear whether he would ever have the opportunity again, as the Pro Cowboys Association prohibited their members, both rodeo and chuckwagon, from competing at the Calgary Stampede. So between 1979 and 1981, Dave Lewis accompanied the professional Chuckwagons to High River to compete at the Battle of the Giants, an alternate event to the Calgary Stampede. Late in 1980, the wagon men decided to leave the Pro Cowboys Association and go out on their own as the World Professional Chuckwagon Association. Dave was not only a founding member, but in the WPCA's inaugural season of 1981, Dave won 3 times and finished the year in 4th place in the world standings. Upon completion of the 1981 season, the Calgary Stampede announced that they would invite the top 9 wagons from the WPCA to compete at the 1982 Rangeland Derby, giving Dave the opportunity to compete at Calgary once again. But on May 6, 1982, just prior to the start of the Chuckwagon season, Dave's wife Joan lost her battle with cancer at the young age of 42. But Dave soldiered on, won the Wainwright Stampede for the 3rd time in his career, and placed 4th overall at the Ponoka Stampede. Things were looking pretty good for Dave Lewis heading into Calgary, but he suffered another setback when it was discovered that following Ponoka, he had a fractured wrist. He wore a cast for a week prior to the start of the Calgary Stampede, then modified it so he could drive, and turned in a performance that is still talked about to this day. Over the first 9 nights, Dave Lewis piloted the Pawnee Memorial Agriplex rig to 5 first-place runs, 1 second and 1 third. He set a new track record, and had it not been for a 1-second penalty for the fly flapping, he would have placed inside the top 10 on 9 consecutive nights. He qualified for the Rangeland Derby's championship final in 1st place overall, and would face Reg Johnstone, Tom Glass, and Kelly Sutherland in an all-WPCA final. He drew barrel number 1, and when the race was complete, Dave Lewis, along with outriders Jerry Bremner, Rick Fraser, George Normand, and Ross Nelson, had captured the 1982 Calgary Stampede Rangeland Derby with his 6th day money run in 10 days. He was also awarded the Frank D. Bean Memorial for having the best 10-day aggregate time, over 7 seconds clear of his nearest rival. It was arguably the most dominating performance the Rangeland Derby has ever seen in a 10-day show, all the while competing with a broken wrist. When the 1983 season rolled around, Dave found himself in a dispute with the World Professional Chuckwagon Association and ran at the 1983 Calgary Stampede as an independent chuckwagon driver. For the 2nd consecutive year, he took the aggregate title, but placed 4th in the Rangeland Derby's championship final. At the conclusion of the 1983 Calgary Stampede, Dave sold his entire outfit and looked to retire, but said he would consider competing at the Rangeland Derby if he received an invitation. The dispute with the WPCA would never be resolved. The invitation from the Calgary Stampede did come about, and the Rangeland Derby was the only show Dave Lewis would continue to compete at for the last 12 years of his career. Although he only competed at the one show for the last dozen years of his career, with his special companion Betty Sinclair at his side, Dave Lewis continued to make history. In 1988, Dave partnered up with the White Spot Restaurant, and along with outriders Mike Vegan, Huey Sinclair, Rick Fraser, and Jeff Hollowatz, won his 2nd Rangeland Derby championship over Jerry Bremner, Ray Mitzewing, and Dallas Dorchester, adding the aggregate title as well, and becoming the only chuckwagon driver to win the Rangeland Derby championship and the aggregate trophy while competing on a special invitation from the Calgary Stampede. In 1990, under the canvas of Western Gas Marketing, and along with outriders Huey Sinclair, Bruce Schultz, Rick Fraser, and Mike Vegan, Dave Lewis captured his 3rd and final Rangeland Derby championship over Kelly Sutherland, Dallas Dorchester, and George Normand. It would be the last victory of Dave Lewis's career. After his 1990 triumph, Dave competed at the Rangeland Derby for another 5 years before retiring for good upon completion of the 1994 Calgary Stampede. After retiring, Dave stayed involved with horses and chuckwagons, training thoroughbreds at the racetrack, and helping some of the Grand Prairie area chuckwagon drivers with their outfits. After an afternoon of spring training with his son Rick Fraser, Dave Lewis passed away suddenly and unexpectedly later that day on April 27, 2000, from a heart attack. He was 63 years old. With 30 victories in a 30-year career, many at chuckwagon racing's most storied events, Dave Lewis is among chuckwagon racing's all-time most decorated champions. But besides his own success, Dave Lewis was also a mentor whose legacy carries on through the successes of the champion drivers whose career he was the most influential over, which includes the likes of Kelly Sutherland, Rick Fraser, and Huey Sinclair. Tonight, we pay special tribute to one of Chuckwagon Racing's all-time greatest mentors, individuals, and champions, Dave Lewis.